welcome to the Quadratic Formula with Cubit Education. In this mini lecture, you will know what the quadratic formula looks like, use the quadratic formula to find roots of equations, and use the discriminant to find out how many roots a quadratic has. So, the quadratic equation. The quadratic equation can be used to find out what values of x will make the equation equal to 0. So basically, you're trying to find out which two values you'll be putting in brackets, just as you would when you do a quadratic equation by factorising. You need it for questions where 2 is the biggest power of x, meaning that you only have an x squared value because that's what a quadratic equation has. That's what makes it a quadratic. And you are asked to solve the equation or find the intersection with the x-axis. So here's an example. Find where y equals 2x squared plus 5x minus 3 crosses the x-axis. Let's just go through some examples of how to do this. So we have y equals 2x squared plus 3x plus 6. And I've put the quadratic formula at the bottom here so that you can see it whilst we go through this. Now, the quadratic formula has all of these letters in that obviously don't look like any of these. So we have to give these meaning. This will be a. So wherever a is in your equation, you will put 2. B is 3 and c is 6. So everywhere that there's a b, you would put 3. Everywhere that there is an a, you would put 2. And where there is a c, you would put 6. Here's another example. 5x squared plus 2x plus 1. A is 5, B is 2, and C is 1. X squared minus 6x plus 11. In this case, A would be 1 because we only have 1x squared. B would be minus 6, and C would be 11. Y equals 4x squared plus x minus 7. A would be 4, B would be 1 because we have 1x, and C would be minus 7. Here we have y equals 2x squared plus x, where a would be 2, b would be 1 because we only have 1x, and c would actually be 0. Make sure you put that 0 in because it matters when you're multiplying. So let's look at this equation and try and put it into the quadratic formula to work out the roots. So start with the quadratic equation and then put in all of our values for a, b and c. So I haven't actually done any calculations yet. All I've done is put in my b's, and my A and my C and my A down here. So everywhere that there is a B, I would put 4. Everywhere that there is an A, I would put 1. And everywhere that there is a C, I would put minus 2. Then I start to tidy it up. The first thing I did was inside the square root sign. Okay, I did 4 squared, which gave me 16. And then I did 4 times minus 4 times 1 times minus 2. Minus 4 times 1 is minus 4. And minus 4 times minus 2 is a positive 8. So this 16 minus minus 8 becomes 16 plus 8. So now we can write that like this. So we have the minus 4 on the end, and then inside our square root we have the 16 plus the 8, which gives us 24. Now you'd have to do this twice because you need one for adding and one for taking away. So in your calculators you would do minus 4 plus the square root of 24 divided by 2 to give you an answer, and then you would write that answer down, and after that you would start again doing minus 4 take away the square root of 24 over 2. You would end up with 2 separate answers. So here's your first calculation with the plus, here's your second calculation with the minus, here's your first answer with the plus, so minus 4.4, and here's your second answer with the minus of 0.4. So you've found where the line, or the quadratic graph, would hit the x-axis. Here's another one. Why don't you pause the video and have a go, and then press play to go through the answer. Okay, if you've had a go, let's begin with the quadratic formula. And then we're going to put in all of our numbers. So A would be 2, B would be 4, and C would be 2. So I'm going to put in all of those numbers. Minus 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 2 divided by 2 times 2. So let's tidy that up a little bit. In the square root sign, I have 16 minus 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16. So in here we have 16 minus 16. And on the bottom, 2 times 2 is 4. So now, in here we actually have a 0. So we can't really have the square root of 0, so we just have to do these two calculations. Minus 4 minus 4, okay, so we can say the square root of 0 is 0. divided by 2, and minus 4 plus 0 divided by 2. We end up with x equals minus 4 over 2. So that means x equals minus 2. This means that the curve on the graph would only hit at one point, which is minus 2 on the x-axis. Okay, so now we have 2x squared plus 3x plus 6. Okay, so let's put in all of our numbers. So for b we had 3, for a we had 2, and for c we had 6. So we end up with minus 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times 6, all divided by 2 times 2. If we tidy that up a little bit, we end up with 9, and then 4 times 2 is 8, and then 8 times 6 is 48. So 9 minus 48. We then end up with minus 3 plus or minus the square root of minus 39, because this 9 take away 48 makes minus 39, all divided by 4. We can't actually find the square roots of a negative, so there is no solution, meaning that there are no roots. So here are our answers. X squared plus 4x minus 2 equals 0 has two solutions. 2x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0 had one solution, and 2x squared plus 3x plus 6 equals 0 had no solutions. So from all of those three that we've looked at, we can see here that it hits the x-axis twice, and we had our answers for that. On this one, we saw that it only hit the x-axis once, and we saw our solution for that. And on the final one, it had no solutions, which meant that the graph, or the curve, sorry, wouldn't hit the axes at all. Now, as we've just worked out the solutions for where the curve hits an x-axis, you can work out how many solutions a graph would have without having to do all of that working out. So, this is the other way you can use the equation. You can use this part of the equation to determine how many roots a quadratic equation has. And it's just the bit below the square root sign. So, just using this will tell you if your curve hits the x-axis twice, once, or not at all. So we take this equation, for example, y equals 2x squared plus 3x plus 6. We know that a is 2, b is 3, and c is 6. So, we take that a equals 2, b equals 3, and c equals 6 and add them to the equation. Here we have 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times 6. Okay, so b is 3, a is 2, and c is 6. That gives us 9 minus 48, which gives us minus 39. Because it's a negative inside a quadratic, that means we can't find a solution to a negative, and that's when we know that a graph or a curve has no points hitting the x-axis. So as long as you put in the right information into this square root sign, you'll be able to determine how many roots it has. This example shows that it has no roots. So here are a few other things to remember. If the answer in the square root is less than 0, there are no real roots. The line doesn't touch the axes at all. So that's the one we've just done. And it looks like this. It doesn't touch the x-axis at all. It touches the y, but don't worry about that. It does not touch the x. If the answer in the square root is equal to 0, there is one root. The line touches the axis at one point, like this one. You can see that this is actually a negative quadratic because it goes the opposite way. If the answer in the square root is more than 1, there are two real roots, which means the line touches the axis at 2 points, like this. Here and here. Okay, well done, and thank you very much for using Cubit Education. I hope that was really helpful, and I will see you next time.